So I know this is a little late. Was kind of traveling over the New Year and the holiday, but wanted to get this video out discussing the quarterfinal games, the bowl games, the playoff bowl games, and then look ahead to the games on actually tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday, the semifinal games. We're going to start off, though, with the New Year's Eve night game, the Penn State-Boise State game. Penn State won the game 31-14. Wasn't too surprised about that because, Penn State just has a lot more talent than Boise State. Obviously, Ashton Jeanty, great player, but when you look at the trenches and the overall roster talent, really Boise State just doesn't compete with Penn State on paper. But in the game, Boise State acquitted themselves very well. It looked like Penn State came out, got up to that 14-0 lead, and it really looked like Boise State was just completely unprepared for the size and speed and athleticism of the Penn State players. But Boise State really, regained their footing and got back into this game. It was, 14-0 after one quarter, and it was 17-7 at halftime. In fact, there was a point in the game, I think, where it was 17-14. Yeah, so early in the third quarter, 17-14, Boise State gets back into it. Then Penn State gets another touchdown pass to Tyler Warren to make it 24-14. Then towards the end of the game, with about 5 minutes remaining, Nick Singleton breaks out for a 58-yard touchdown run, and that about sealed the deal. But, yeah, early on this game looked like it was going to be a complete beatdown. Boise State was just, had no business being on the field, but they really acquitted themselves very well. But overall, it looked like Penn State's defensive front was just way too much for Boise State's offensive line. Ashton Jeanty, a lot of people were talking about, how he got exposed or something like that. I mean, he was getting hit in the backfield pretty much every carry. He still managed to get over 100 yards, 30 carries, but the guy had to break a lot of tackles and make a lot of guys miss. It was a pretty Herculean effort by him. Again, Penn State's defensive front just head and shoulders above anything that Boise State has faced this season, with the exception of maybe Oregon. But I think Penn State is probably better than Oregon. Boise State, though, if you actually look at the internals of this game, if you look at the numbers, Boise State's 8-16 on third down, had 24 first downs. Penn State had 21, outgained Penn State 412 to 387. Now, they did get badly outgained on the ground, 216 to 108 on basically an equal number of carries. Penn State was averaging 5.3 yards a carry, Boise State 2.7. Just a lot easier for Penn State to run the football. The killer, of course, being that 4-1 turnover margin in favor of Penn State. Otherwise, this could have been a completely different game. I think, again, Boise State really regained their footing in this game and started fighting pretty well. I thought Boise State, obviously the mistakes cost them. They missed a couple field goals, one from 45 yards on the first drive, and then there was another one the second half from 38 yards that they missed. Overall, I would characterize this game as being both closer than expected and very lopsided in Penn State's favor. Just the way that Penn State jumped out to an early lead, the way that, from the rushing battle, you can really tell that Penn State was dominating the line of scrimmage. At no point did I really, even when it was 17-14, at no point did I really ever feel like Penn State was in jeopardy of losing the game. More, I just thought it was them kind of playing with their food a little bit. But still, Boise State showed that they belonged. They didn't get embarrassed in this game. I didn't think they got embarrassed. It's a sport about talent, and Penn State has a much more talented roster than Boise State has. And it's not like the NFL where the talent is relatively equal. I mean, there's vast disparities in talent in college football. But Penn State wins 31-14. They advance. Now they will play Notre Dame. So what we'll do now is go into the Notre Dame Georgia game, because I'm going to just kind of keep it on that side of the bracket, even though that this game was the one that happened last. And I'm not going to go in order of the games. I'm just going to go in order of the I'm just going to go by bracket, and then I'll give my pick and a little analysis on the upcoming Notre Dame Penn State game. I thought Notre Dame would win this game against Georgia, and my power ratings, which I'll go to here, my power ratings like Notre Dame over Georgia. My power ratings had Notre Dame. Well, these are actually after the game, but right now I'd have Notre Dame as about a 9-point favorite over Georgia on a neutral field. The power rating still had Notre Dame ranked ahead of Georgia before the game, though. But Notre Dame is a really solid team, and it kind of at times looked like Georgia was pushing around up front and moving the ball a little bit easier. And this game probably should have been a lot closer. It was one of those defensive struggle games where you knew that points were going to be at a premium. And Georgia really was in this game. If we go to the scoring summary, Georgia goes up 3-0. Notre Dame ties it up at 3. Then they go up. I don't know why everything is doubled up here. Then they go up 6-3 with 39 seconds left in the first half, right? And you're thinking this is going to be a defensive struggle, and you can actually see over here on the game win probability. I mean, Notre Dame's win odds in this game just skyrocketed right around the end of the first half and start of the second half. There's 39 seconds left. Georgia gets the ball back. They allow a strip sack fumble. Notre Dame takes that immediately, turns it into a touchdown to make it 13-3. I mean, thought Georgia probably should have just kneeled the clock out and just went into halftime down 6-3. And instead they don't. They go for it. They drop Gunnar Stockton back to pass. He fumbles it. And Notre Dame's able to convert that into a touchdown. So instead of going into the half down 6-3, Georgia's down 13-3. Then, to open up the second half, Notre Dame takes the opening kickoff back 98 yards for a touchdown to make it 20-3. And that's where you can see here on the win probability. After that moment, Notre Dame was 92% to win. And Georgia did kind of fight back a little bit. They responded with a touchdown drive of their own a little bit later in the third quarter. And so they made it 20-10 with about 9.5 minutes to go in the third quarter. So you're thinking, maybe Georgia will be able to get something going here and get back into this game. You make it 20-17 and it's still a ball game there. But really, that touchdown drive that they had in the third quarter was the only time that they had ever been able to put together a good offensive drive in that game. Find the end zone, obviously. But, I mean, we look at the numbers of this game. Georgia did outgain Penn State in 296 to 244. They did have 16 first downs to Notre Dame's 14. Both teams were unsuccessful on their fourth down attempts. Georgia was 0-3. Notre Dame was 0-1. 90 yards passing for Notre Dame, 234 for Georgia. I thought Gunnar Stockton played pretty well. I didn't think he was the reason that he lost this game. I thought Notre Dame's defense was really good coming into the game. They proved it in the game, but I think Gunnar Stockton acquitted himself well. What really surprised me was this rushing number here. This 62 rush yards on 29 attempts for Georgia for just 2.1 yards a carry. 154 rushing yards, 37 attempts, 4.2 yards a carry. And Notre Dame doubled them up in penalties too. Couple of those, some of that rushing number is going to be affected by the sacks. Notre Dame's defense did have 4 sacks. I'm not sure how many yards, but Gunnar Stockton ended up with minus 23 rush yards, but still that only puts Georgia at, we just give them all those negative 23 rushing yards. We'll just put them at 85. That's still 29 carries for, or whatever it was, maybe 25 minus the 4 sacks. 25 carries, 85 yards, still not good enough to get it done. Again, pretty ugly game, defensive-driven game. Points are going to be at a premium. To give up, a touchdown when you should just go into the half, and then to give up a touchdown on the ensuing kick return. 14 points in a game where points were at a premium that Georgia was on the wrong end of. You're just not going to come back from that in a low-scoring game like that against a defense like Notre Dame. Talk about the quarterbacks a little bit here. Gunnar Stockton, again, I said I think he played well. The way I would describe it is that I didn't really notice Gunnar Stockton, if that makes any sense. Like I wasn't constantly thinking, oh yeah, Georgia's got a backup quarterback in. He made some good throws. Overall, I don't think he was the reason they lost. A few times in that game, I thought to myself, like, wow, that looks like a throw that Carson Beck would have made. In other words, I didn't really notice that big of a drop off. Maybe I'm wrong about that because I haven't really been closely scrutinizing Georgia all season. But personally, I didn't see that big of a drop off between from Carson Beck to Gunnar Stockton. I thought Stockton played pretty well. Obviously, didn't play great. But I didn't think he was the reason that they lost the game. As for Riley Leonard, he only had 90 passing yards. He did lead the team with 80 rushing yards. Other than that, they didn't do a whole lot on the ground. I think Jeremiah Love got hurt in the game. If we take away Riley Leonard's 14 carries for 80 yards, 23 carries for 74 yards, not super effective on the ground. Obviously you expect that against a really tough defense like Georgia. But Riley Leonard, guy is just, I know it's a cliche for white players, but this dude, just all grit. I don't really know what else to call it. It was just grit. Overall, I thought it felt like Georgia kind of just abandoned the run in the second half. And maybe, you do that because you're down by 17 points, but this looks completely wrong. Jeremiah Love is not on Georgia. I don't understand. I think ESPN kind of got this all screwed up, but they had this Trevor Etienne run there on that touchdown drive. You're down 20-10. Let's see here. I don't know why it's showing Riley Leonard and Notre Dame plays. Trevor Etienne run. So I guess they kind of were running it. I don't know. It just really didn't feel like Georgia was able to. It didn't feel like they committed to the run. And the weird thing about that is you've got a top-tier SEC team. They won the SEC this year, running for 2.1 yards per carry in a postseason game against a non-SEC team. That's pretty fairly shocking. Normally, it's the other way around. Normally, in these big bowl games, you're going to see the SEC team running for over 5 yards a carry, holding the other non-SEC team to under 2 yards. It's been basically a staple of postseason bowl games. with a few exceptions for the past 20 years. I mean, SEC teams, that's where they have had their run of dominance. It's been in the trenches, and it just seems like a sign of the times that you're seeing that completely flipped on its head, where the SEC is not dominant in the trenches, and Notre Dame was able to just completely suffocate the Georgia run game. Another thing I noticed about Georgia, they were not a good tackling team. I was really surprised by that. They do not wrap guys up well. Especially, you got Kirby Smart as your head coach. So that really shocked me, was how bad Georgia was at tackling. Overall, though, I mean, you still got one SEC team left in the playoff. You have Texas, but Texas is not a legacy SEC team. So all the legacy SEC teams are out. Basically, just Georgia and Tennessee, both having lost fairly convincingly. Obviously, Tennessee got dominated way more than Georgia did, and you're seeing a lot of chatter online about how, the SEC now looks like it's pretty mortal and back down to the rest of the pack now that paying players is legal. This is kind of an interesting conversation, just based on the idea that the SEC perfected the bag man, the illegal paying of players decades ago, and really was just ahead of the curve compared to the Big Ten and the other conferences for the past few decades. But the line of reasoning on this goes, with paying players legalized, it's out in the open now. You don't have to funnel it in convoluted ways through a facility of local churches or car dealers or car dealers handing out Hellcats and bagmen. And the SEC arguably has lost its edge in recruiting now that it no longer is ahead of the pack when it comes to handing money to players, not getting caught on it. Personally, and I know I've seen a lot of this talk on social media lately, I personally will need a larger sample size to evaluate. We're just looking at this season. The SEC's bowl record still pretty good. I think it was 8-6 the last I checked. The Big Ten at that point was 8-5. That could certainly be the evidence that people are talking about. Where the SEC was dominant and now they're just kind of among the pack now. And they're not head and shoulders ahead of the rest of the conferences. But, last year they were 5-4 in the postseason as well. So maybe this is kind of a longer running trend emerging. But if it is true, and that NIL and legalized paying of players primarily benefits non-SEC schools and brings them much closer to the SEC, I think that's the problem, because you're basically awakening the full might of the booster networks of these northern programs. And you see it with Ohio State this year. You see it with what Ohio State's doing in the portal and on the recruiting trail. Michigan just had Larry Ellison drop $13 million on a quarterback, pulled him from an SEC school. He was originally committed to LSU. And that's just one major example that I can think of. So yeah, the times may be changing, and the SEC may have been their dominance may have been an illusion. I mean, there's no doubt that the best players in the country still primarily come from the Southeast and Texas and the warm weather states, California as well. But I think the idea is that the SEC was getting the best players not because of better coaching, but just because they were the ones that had perfected the art of illegal payments to players long before the Big Ten did. Now, I guess USC would be an exception to that because they had the Reggie Bush scandal going on in the 2000s, but it's an interesting thing to talk about, something that you obviously are going to want to follow. I think personally Texas is kind of immune to that, not just Texas Longhorns, but like Texas A&M. And I think this might actually be a net boost for Texas A&M in terms of how they fare in the SEC. But I think, when you look at programs like, I don't think Georgia's going to fall off or anything. And I also think Georgia's a little more insulated from it because there's a lot of money in Atlanta, being like the de facto capital of the South. But you think about places like LSU, Alabama. They're not, relatively speaking, as wealthy as their Big Ten counterparts up north. I mean, Washington's out of Seattle. There's tons of tech money in Seattle. You got the two Los Angeles schools, Oregon, of course, tons of money with the Nike affiliation there. Ohio State. Ohio is one of the biggest, most populous states in the country. They have a massive alumni network. And that's another thing, is these Big Ten schools are a lot bigger than their SEC counterparts. Like Ohio State, just in general, is a much bigger university, has a much bigger student body than the University of Georgia, and that's kind of a general rule. When comparing the Big Ten to the SEC, you always wonder, why do the Big Ten, why the SEC is so much more dominant on the field? Why does the Big Ten have a bigger TV contract? Well, because these Big Ten schools are bigger, and they have more money, and they have bigger alumni bases, and they're generally wealthier in terms of their alumni bases and booster networks. Now with NIL legalized, all that has been brought basically from out of bounds into the playing field, whereas the SEC doesn't really get as big of a bump because they've already been paying players illegally for years, and now it's really just allowed everybody else to catch up. And it's possibly one of those big long-term changes in college football that's going to reshape the sport, and we may just be in the infancy of this. I still think the SEC will be a great conference because, again, all the best players are from the South. Or not all of them, but the majority of them concentrated in the South. I mean, you look at the talent in a state like Louisiana compared to a state like Indiana, which is about a similar population. Louisiana produces so many more NFL caliber football players than the state of Indiana does, despite being very similar population-wise. So I think it's something to watch. But we're going to now go on to Notre Dame versus Penn State. Now, I know Jeremiah Love, injury status questionable. Penn State, though, also wondering if Abdul Carter is going to be able to play. Personally, in that game, I will take Notre Dame to beat Penn State. So I've got Notre Dame currently as a 3-point underdog in my power ratings. If we look at the matchups, Notre Dame is the second-ranked rushing offense. Penn State has the number 8 rushing defense. So Notre Dame does have a slight edge there, although Penn State is really good against the run. Offensive, Penn State's run game, 17th in yards per carry, whereas Notre Dame is 25th against the run in terms of yards per carry allowed. So another advantage, so that's an advantage to Penn State there. Notre Dame's passing offense only ranks 92nd in yards per attempt, whereas Penn State is 24th against the pass. So that's another advantage to Penn State there. So they have the advantage when it comes to rushing the ball and throwing the ball. Now, passing offense, Penn State's passing offense versus Notre Dame's passing defense. Notre Dame is the third-ranked pass defense, whereas Penn State is 17th in passing game efficiency. So Notre Dame is going to have the edge there. I do wonder if Notre Dame has truly been tested in terms of a great passing team. I know they did play Indiana. But otherwise, I take a look at Notre Dame's schedule here. And, I mean, A&M, not a great passing team. Northern Illinois, obviously the loss to them. But, you got Louisville, pretty decent passing team. Georgia Tech, not really a passing team. Obviously, Navy, Florida State's horrendous. You played Army. You went to USC. You let up 35 points. 360 yards passing. So I'm kind of wondering if Notre Dame's pass defense is more a result of their weak schedule than anything else. Just in terms of teams against, the teams they've played against that just weren't great at throwing the ball. I'm going to take Notre Dame to win. I'm going to go against my power ratings. The spread on this game is Notre Dame minus 1.5. It opened at 1.5. ESPN's matchup predictor has Notre Dame predicted to win, 58% chance. I'm really worried about Abdul Carter's health and whether he's going to be able to play in the game, and if he does play, if he's going to be full strength. But overall, I just think that Notre Dame, in terms of their path to this point, Notre Dame has really earned their way in, whereas Penn State has kind of just played a bunch of overmatched teams. I mean, they got to play SMU at home. They got to take a team out of Texas, bring them up to State College in December, and just put a beating on them. And then they played Boise State, who, again, they fought. They played tough. Probably didn't really belong on the field against Penn State, sorry. So I am going to take Notre Dame to win the game. I'm going to take them to cover the 1.5 there. I feel like Notre Dame has kind of earned their way in to where they are, whereas Penn State is kind of just there by default. The next game we'll focus on here is the Texas-Arizona State game. This obviously was an all-time classic of a game. One game we're not going to forget for a long time to come. I thought it was interesting how this game went. Texas quickly goes up 17-3. They're up 17-3 at halftime, and then so many times Arizona State would have that ball inside the 5-yard line and just fail on the goal line. It felt like Texas was going to run away with it, but they just didn't. They stop Arizona State on 4th and goal, get the ball back on the 1. ASU forces a fumble, pops back into Quinn Ewers' hands. He's got nowhere to go. He gets tackled 17-5. So Arizona State's back on the board. That felt kind of like a turning point moment in the game because after that, Arizona State, they would get the ball back later, go 11 plays, 50 yards, kick a field goal, 17-8, kind of chipping their way back into it. Then to open up the fourth quarter, Texas goes on a pretty impressive 13-play, 76-yard touchdown run to go up 24-8, and you're like, all right, kind of feels like it's Jover at this point. But then Arizona State answers back. They had that long 42-yard touchdown pass from Cam Scatabo to Malik McClain. They get the 2-point conversion. It's 24-16 with 6:31 to go. And you look at this drive, 10 plays, 75 yards. Well, other than the 42-yard pass, it was 9 plays for 33 yards. So wasn't really, Arizona State really had to pull out all the stops. They get the pick on Ewers. I believe that was like the controversial targeting, possibly targeting or not. Cam Scatabo, I believe he busted off a big run on this drive, 3 plays, 79 yards, only a 37-second drive. They tie the game up at 24, get that 2-point conversion, and at that point, I was kind of thinking that they had seized all the momentum, and it was Texas didn't really have a lot going on. Texas gets the ball back after that, goes down the field. Bert Auburn misses a 48-yarder. Not really confident in Bert Auburn. Don't think he's a kicker you can trust. So then Arizona State gets the ball back, and they get it to pretty close to midfield. 10 yards, gets it to their own 48. That was the one where they reviewed it for targeting by the Texas guy. I thought it was going to be called targeting just because defenseless receiver, he led with the head and made forcible contact to the head or neck. I don't know what targeting is anymore. I don't know. The only way I can rationalize that decision by the referees there was that they just didn't want to decide the game because it would have decided the game. Basically, I mean, you would have given Arizona State the ball let's see, they would have had it at the 48, and then it would have been another 15 yards. So you get it down to the 38, the Texas 38, with about a minute to play, and you're looking at a 1st and 10 where you basically need 10 yards-ish, 10 yards, and you're in range for a very makeable field goal. I thought that was where Arizona State was going to win the game. The refs come back, said it was not targeting. Texas gets the ball back, drives it down the field. In 51 or 57 seconds, Bert Auburn misses another field goal to win the game, this time at the buzzer. Arizona State's got the ball in overtime. They go up 31-24. They got Texas down to a 4th and 13 at the 28. And Twin Ewers, Matthew Golden beat them deep. They go over the top. Arizona State basically sent a house blitz, and they let Golden get behind him, and Texas ties it up, gets the ball back, scores, 2-point conversion, like almost immediately. Arizona State throws a pick, ball game. There were multiple instances where I thought Arizona State was definitely going to win the game right before the targeting call was, before the refs determined that it was not targeting. And on that 4th and 13, I mean, Arizona State had him dead to rights. As soon as I saw them send the blitz, my reaction was not positive. Obviously, I was rooting for Arizona State. I wanted to see them prevail in a crazy game like that. But overall, got to give credit to Ewers and Matthew Golden for making that game. That was just really, that play, that was really just, the ball game was on the line. Texas O-line was able to handle the blitz. Ewers finds the open man. Golden gets behind the defense. Just a really gutsy play there. But then, after that, just felt like Arizona State was completely out of gas. And Scatabo, Levitt, both of them just really played their asses off in this game. Got nothing but good things to say about those guys. Texas had a lot of trouble moving the ball in this game for long stretches. I mean, obviously they jump out to the 17-3 lead. I think Texas has a pretty good offensive line. Sark's a good play caller. Ewers is a solid quarterback. They've got good skill talent. Some reason it just feels like the sum is less than the parts with Texas. I don't know what it is. They have a really talented roster, but I mean, you look at the way that they were really dominated in this game. 38 minutes of possession for Arizona State, 510 yards of offense to 375 for Texas, 29 first downs to 17 for Texas. Texas was more efficient throwing the ball, but 53 rushing yards on 30 attempts, 1.8 yards a carry. Not good. I mean, Arizona State, 214 yards on the ground, 49. I mean, I always say this, like, you run the ball 50 times in a game, you are eventually going to break the other team's run defense. The only way to stop that is by cutting off the run and getting a lead on the team and preventing them from running it that many times on you. Basically forcing them to abandon the run. It's how Michigan plays Ohio State every year. They run the ball. And Ohio State just can't get that lead on Michigan to make them abandon the run. There's some teams where they just, if they have to abandon the run, they're like a turtle on its back. And Arizona State, to their credit, they were down big in this game, and they still never abandoned the run. But, I mean, I look at the numbers here, and not really. I mean, Texas obviously comes away with the win, but weird game. I mean, they were outscored in regulation. After they went up 17-3, they were outscored 21-3 the rest of the way in regulation. 21-7 the rest of the way in regulation. Again, Texas probably should have lost this game, but they won it. They're alive. Got to give Cam Scatabo and Sam Levitt their flowers. Texas kind of resembled the Clemson game where they went up big, let Clemson back into the game, but they were able to kind of shut the door on Clemson with a big, long touchdown run. A&M, last game of the regular season, go up 17-0 at halftime, hold on to win 17-7, didn't score a single point in the second half. I'm not going to fully write Texas off against Ohio State. I think, with their talent, and they've got a really good defense, I think it'll be pretty tough for them to score points on Ohio State. We'll get to that later, though. Now we're going to jump over to the Rose Bowl game, the Ohio State-Oregon Rose Bowl. Not expecting a game like this. When Ohio State's up 34-0 in the blink of an eye, basically. When you look at that, they were up 34-8 at halftime. I was expecting this game to come down to the wire the way the first meeting between these two teams did. I thought it was going to be an instant classic, 4-quarter heavyweight slugfest, and I kind of thought Ohio State was going to lose. But in reality, it looked like the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th quarters of the Tennessee game. I mean, it looked like Ohio State just picked up right where they left off. And right now, Ohio State looks like the best team in the country. It doesn't look like any of the other teams that are alive are on Ohio State's level. Not saying that guarantees Ohio State to win the national championship. They should, but, anything can happen. Jeremiah Smith, best receiver in the country. It's solidified. It's over. The conversation is over. 7 catches, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, we've already said all the words that we can possibly say about Jeremiah Smith. True freshman, just an unbelievable, just a total and complete dominator. As a true freshman, he completely takes over games. This is why I say for a while now, he's the LeBron James of football. I don't remember the last time I've seen a true freshman this good, be this much of a game breaker. He might be the best player in America already. There's nobody that can cover him. He's bigger, stronger. He's faster than basically every player on the field, no matter who they play. What Jeremiah Smith is an all-pro level NFL receiver playing in college. Just straight up. He is a like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson level NFL talent who just happens to be playing in college. Like that. This is what it would look like if like Julio Jones in his prime was playing college football. 7 catches, 187 yards, 2 touchdown, games over by halftime. No DB in college. I don't think there's any DB in college football that can touch him. Texas has got some good ones. We'll see. I might eat my words on that one. But right now, I mean, Jabbar Muhammad's a really good corner for Oregon. Oregon has some players on their defense. It ain't like Oregon is just this like, all offense, no defense team. They've got Derek Harmon, big defensive tackle in the middle. They had Jordan Birch back, great pass rusher. They had Mateo. They had Jabbar Muhammad. Oregon's got some dudes in their defense. And Jeremiah Smith just made them all look like they didn't even belong on the field. So combined between the Oregon game and the Tennessee game, Jeremiah Smith now has 13 catches, 290 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Defensively, Ohio State was really lights out. Jack Sawyer, amazing game. Cody Simon, Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom. Secondary was torched by Oregon in the first game. Basically played lights out in this game. Denzel Burke, great redemption. Nobody was getting open deep for Oregon. Pass rush, non-existent in the first game. 8 sacks. In this one, batting passes all the time. Looked like Dylan Gabriel was not comfortable at all in the pocket. It looked like he was just running for his life back there. 13 tackles for losses, 8 sacks. I mean, 9 passes defended for Ohio State. Jack Sawyer, 3 of them. You're looking at Cody Simon, JT Tuimoloau. I mean, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Caleb Downs with 3 passes defended. I mean, just an all-around dominant performance by Ohio State's defense. I mean, night and day difference. And I think Oregon was the best offense in the country up to this point. And for Ohio State's defense to do that against them, that's a statement. That's really a statement. Overall, both sides of the ball, Ohio State just dominant. They beat Tennessee by 25. They beat Oregon by 20. Really, really impressive playoff run by them. Obviously, where was this against Michigan? You're probably going to have to ask that question. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, I guess we just have to come to the conclusion now that the Michigan game exists in its own separate box, separate from the regular season, separate from the postseason. It's his own unique beast, and Ryan Day can clearly perform in the playoffs. He does great in the regular season. The Michigan game is its own. It's just in its own box off by itself. Not something that you're going to have to worry about now for another year, of course. Still obviously a question about Ryan Day's ability to win that game, but didn't kill your season. You're alive. You're very much alive. You're the odds-on favorite to win the national championship. Clearly this team is on a mission and doesn't look like anybody can hang with them. A few more things about the Ohio State offense. Will Howard, NFL quarterback. I don't know where I'd rank him. I don't know where I'd draft him, but I would definitely say he is an NFL quarterback. I don't know. I'm not saying he's going to be like, the next Joe Burrow or anything like that, but he's an NFL quarterback. Go back and watch that throw he made to Emeka Egbuka for the touchdown. He's got an arm. He can throw it deep. Will Howard, draft stock is, if he continues playing like this, they win the national championship. What did he have in this game? 319 yards? Yeah. 3 touchdowns. Almost a perfect QBR. He's an NFL quarterback. But overall, Ohio State just went belt to ass on the number 1 undefeated team in the country, and it's a tough team. Ohio State is. They've got senior leadership. These guys came back on a mission to win a national championship. It just feels right now that this Ohio State team will not be denied. And as for Oregon, did the long layoff hurt them? Wouldn't be surprised if it did. They didn't look prepared for this game at all. It looked like Oregon got hit by a tsunami. That's like the way I would describe the first half of this game. Like Oregon just got hit by a tidal wave. And before they could even collect their thoughts, they were down 24-0, then 31-0, then 34. It was just body blow after body blow after body blow before I think the Jeremiah Smith long touchdown, then the Travion Henderson long touchdown. I think those were really the knockout blow. Like that was when Apollo Creed, when Ivan Drago just landed the kill shot on Apollo Creed in Rocky IV. I think, though, and I kind of want to shift to another conversation here about the format of the playoff, the structure of the playoff. Oregon definitely did get a raw deal. And, yes, they were going to have to play Ohio State at some point in the playoffs, whether it had been, in the second round in the Rose Bowl or maybe all the way in the national championship. But for Oregon to have that long layoff with Christmas in there, I think they got rusty. They weren't prepared for this game. And for them to have to play a team like Ohio State with all those, Ohio State is probably the best roster in the country, actually definitely the best roster in the country, regardless of their struggle against Michigan, regardless of Oregon, beating them by 1 point in Eugene earlier in the season. Ohio State has the best collection of talent in the country. And I think probably the best coordinators as well between Jim Knowles and Chip Kelly. Ohio State has the best offensive and defensive coordinators in the country, paired with the best talent. This, despite Ohio State being an 8 seed, it was the nightmare draw for Oregon. I just anecdotally, I was at the Ohio State Northwestern game in Chicago at Wrigley Field, bumped into an Oregon fan who was traveling, going up to, he's going to catch that game at Wrigley Field. Oregon was playing at Wisconsin later that night. He was there with his son, kind of just chatting a bit, and he said he was pretty convinced that the two teams would rematch. We both thought it would be in the Big Ten Championship. Obviously, that didn't happen. But he was like, you guys are going to win the rematch. Ohio State's going to win the rematch. And I wasn't so sure. He was right. And now we see why. But overall, I mean, back to the playoff format, I think you were, as a number one team in the country, like I know people are going to say, well, Oregon, and even Oregon's going to say, well, we'll play anybody anywhere. We don't care. We're not going to duck smoke. No, I get it. And people are saying like, well, if Oregon was going to win a national championship, then they're going to have to beat Ohio State. So, there's no excuses. I get it. But as the number one seed in the country, Oregon was the best team in the country for the entire regular season. They were the only team that went undefeated. They went 13-0. They won the Big Ten. They overcame all challengers, stood alone as the undefeated team, number one seed. Their reward is that they have to play the best team in the playoffs. There's supposed to be a reward for getting the top seed. In the NFL, there is. In the NFL, you get a bye, and then you play the lowest remaining seed. You're entitled to a tune-up to start the playoff. Every other sport does it. College basketball does it. You get the 1 seed. You get you get a 1 seed in college basketball. You get to play a 16 seed. I mean, you get to play the worst teams in the tournament, right? NFL, you get a bye. NBA, you get to play the 8 seed. Every playoff does it. You're the best team in the regular season. You're entitled to a tune-up to start the playoffs. Oregon got the complete opposite of a tune-up game. They had to go against the most stacked roster in the country and a team, an Ohio State, that was motivated for revenge after losing to Oregon earlier in the season. Again, nightmare scenario for Oregon. It's really hard to beat a team twice. And especially, because Ohio State, after the Oregon game, they changed up their entire defense. Oregon, what are we going to change? We won the game. Why do we change anything, right? And I know there's some, the coach is going to try to tell you not to rest on your laurels. Don't get satisfied. Don't get complacent. It happens. You won the game. We're better than them, right? That's what you're going to inevitably think. That's going to creep into your mind. Whereas Ohio State, they're like, we got to go back to the drawing board. We got to get better. Oregon got a raw deal. And again, the way the system is set up will have to change. And I think they are talking about it already will. But I was saying this all season long, and I was hearing other people say this all season long, that the 5 seed was actually better than the 1 seed, even though you wouldn't get a bye. Think about this. Penn State loses to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game. Penn State got to play SMU at home. Then they got to play Boise State on a neutral field. Oregon got a bye and then had to go to a neutral site against Ohio State. If Oregon had gotten Penn State's path, if they had gotten to play SMU in Eugene, then Boise State on a neutral field, a rematch, would Oregon still be alive? If Penn State had to play, or just, I don't know if they would get a bye. Let's just say whatever, but Penn State has to play Ohio State. Would Penn State have beaten Ohio State? Probably not. Penn State would be gone now, and Oregon would still be in the tournament. Oregon, would they lose to Ohio State again in the rematch, whenever that may be, whether it be the semifinals of the national championship? Yes. But they'd still be alive. And it's just unfair that Penn State loses to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, and they got rewarded. They got the better path in the playoff than Oregon, and it just doesn't sit right with me personally. College football, the college football playoff is going to have to reorganize this whole thing. In fact, it wasn't just Penn State that got rewarded for losing their conference championship game. Texas also did as well. Texas got to play a middling Clemson. Clemson was the only team in the playoff field that was there because they were an automatic berth. Because they clinched an automatic berth for winning their conference. They're the only team. They were the only team that was ranked outside of the top 12. Okay. Boise State, say what you want about them, they were ranked inside the top 12, so they deserved to be in the playoffs. And Arizona State was ranked inside the top 12. They deserved to be in the playoff. They were one of the top 12 ranked teams. Clemson was the only team that wasn't. And that's who Texas got to play. They got to play them at home, too. And then they got to play a scrappy but overmatched Arizona State team. Georgia got the bye. They had to play Notre Dame. Notre Dame, better team than Clemson. Notre Dame, better team than Arizona State. I think. But I don't know. That one I'm not so sure about, but I think Notre Dame was a better team. Georgia had to play Notre Dame. I just think Georgia would have preferred Texas's path rather than the one that they got. And they'll never admit this because obviously you're going to say, we want to play the best, iron sharpens iron, all that good stuff. I'm going to say it, though. This system does not incentivize finishing the regular season with the best record. It doesn't. You want to be the 5 seed or you want to be the 6 seed. And again, people pointed this out in the summer, maybe even before that. People, as early as this playoff format was announced, people had pointed this out, and they were like, yeah, it's actually better to get the 5 seed. And all the bye teams lost. Now, that one of the bye teams was Arizona State. One of the bye teams was Boise State. But you still had Oregon lose. You still had Georgia. You had the SEC champion and the Big Ten champion both lose. So, I mean, we all knew, the Big Ten and SEC champs would get the 1 and 2 seeds. The ACC and Big 12 champs were going to take the 3 and 4 seeds. And then after that, the 5 through 11 seeds were going to be very strong, dangerous teams like Ohio State, like Penn State, like Texas, and Notre Dame. And so we knew that the 5 through 11 seeds were going to be far better teams than the 3 and 4 seeds from the ACC and the Big 12. And the bottom line, winning your conference should not guarantee you a bye. The bye should be determined by where you ranked in the final CFP poll. So if it actually was set up this way, what would it look like? So this is what it would look like if conference championships did not clinch you a bye. So if conference championships were not required for you to get a bye, this is what it would look like. We would have Oregon with a bye. We would have Georgia with a bye as the 2 seed. We would have 3 seed Texas as a bye. We would have 4 seed Penn State as a bye. Now, does that make the conference championship games irrelevant? Yeah, kinda, because both of the teams that participated in the conference championship games still got byes either way. Maybe that's because these conference championship games were very close. Texas, Georgia went to overtime. Oregon, Penn State was a big shootout. I don't know. I still think we should get rid of the conference championship games. I think they're stupid, personally. I think they're redundant. I think they're unnecessary now. They're never going anywhere because they make a lot of money. But personally, my solution to that, like my solution is not that this bracket is wrong. My solution is that we should not have conference championship games. That's a whole different conversation, though. If conference championship was not required to get a bye, you'd have Oregon as the 1 seed, Georgia as the 2 seed, Texas as the 3 seed, Penn State as the 4 seed. Well, you'd have Notre Dame as the 5 seed. Notre Dame is the 5 seed. Ohio State, instead of the 8th seed, they'd be the 6th seed. Tennessee would be your 7th seed. Indiana 8th, Boise State 9th, SMU 10th, Arizona State 11th, and then Clemson 12th. Even though Clemson won the ACC, they still don't get a bye because they were the only team that finished outside the top 12 and made the playoff. So if we just take the higher rated team or the higher seed team, we're going to have Boise State at Indiana. We'll take Indiana to advance at home. Clemson visits Notre Dame. Notre Dame wins that game, advances to play Penn State in a neutral site. So Indiana's playing Oregon at a neutral site. SMU visits Tennessee. Tennessee wins that game. They go visit Georgia for a rematch. Or actually, they don't visit Georgia, but Tennessee goes to play Georgia at a neutral site in a rematch of a game that was played in Georgia earlier this year, which Georgia won 31-17. Arizona State then does not get a bye. They go to Columbus to play Ohio State, and we'll say Ohio State wins that game. We still get this Texas-Ohio State matchup here, but it's a 3 versus 6. We've got Georgia, Tennessee, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Oregon, Indiana. That, for Oregon, is a much more favorable draw than getting Ohio State after a month-long layoff, I think. Give them a kind of a tune-up game. They should beat Indiana. So, personally, I just think this is a lot more fair, right? Because just assuming the higher rated team or the higher seeded team loses, in the first round, or the higher seeded team wins in the first round here, you're going to get the lowest seeded team playing the number 1 seed. Or you could even do it where you reseed after each round. So let's say Clemson upsets Notre Dame. They don't go to play Penn State, they'll go to play Oregon, right? So that you could say that the 1 seed will always get the lowest remaining seed in that, from the winners of the opening round games, and then the 2 seed would get the second worst or the second lowest ranked team remaining. 3 seed would get the third lowest ranked team remaining, and then the 4 seed would get the highest rated team remaining. The current system, Ohio State was ranked number 6 in the final rankings. They are now an 8th seed because of the format, and they're just not an 8th seed. They shouldn't be an 8th seed. But, Texas is going to have to play them either way. I just personally think this way works out a lot better. It's more fair. It's more rewarding for winning the regular season. Because, even if you want to include the conference championship games and say we're going to keep them, then what happened, to Oregon for winning the Big Ten? Well, now they get to play Indiana or Boise State in the second round, whereas Penn State is probably going to have to play Notre Dame, which is obviously we saw Penn State, or we saw Notre Dame and Indiana play each other. Notre Dame's a far superior team. That's the difference right there. You lose the Big Ten championship, you got to play Notre Dame instead of Indiana. So, anyway, that is my thought on just Oregon and their whole season. Now, regarding the Ohio State-Texas game, the line opened at Ohio State -5. It's currently Ohio State -5.5. They're -225 in the money line. ESPN actually has them as a slight underdog in their matchup predictor. My power ratings have Ohio State as a 5-point favorite, and it looks like it just disappeared on me there. I've got Ohio State as a 5-point favorite. Ohio State, number 2 in rush yards per carry allowed. Texas rushing the ball, rushing efficiency, 61st. Ohio State, big advantage there against the Texas rushing offense. Offensively for Ohio State, 26th in yards per carry average. Texas, 14th against the run, so Texas gets the edge there. Offensive passing yards per attempt, Texas is 22nd. Ohio State is 3rd against the pass. Texas is number 1 against the pass. Ohio State is number 5 in passing efficiency. So overall, Ohio State ranks really highly in just about everything, whereas Texas, in terms of yards per pass attempt, not really the greatest. I am taking Ohio State to win the game. I guess I'm taking them to cover. I will take Ohio State to win something like 34-20, 31-20, 27-17, something like that. Could even be a closer game. I still think I like Ohio State to cover the 5.5. I don't think it will be under a touchdown. Texas overall, suspect on offense, really solid on defense. I also don't think Texas's defense has been particularly well tested this season. They haven't played a lot of great offenses. They did play Clemson, which I will give them credit for that. But, I mean, you played Colorado State, Michigan, not a great offense, UTSA, UL Monroe, Mississippi State. Oklahoma is abysmal on offense. Then Georgia, you host Georgia at home. You get blown, well, not blown out, but you lose by 15 points. Vanderbilt, you barely win. Florida without Lagway, you destroy them. Good for you. Arkansas, kind of an ugly win. Kentucky, kind of grind that one out. A&M, kind of. I don't think the passing offenses in the Big Ten or the SEC. Sorry, I don't really think there was the quarterback play in the Big Ten in the SEC. Sorry. I don't think the quarterback play in the SEC was that great this year. I don't think there were very good offenses. Ole Miss, pretty good. But Texas didn't play Ole Miss. They didn't play Alabama. I don't know. I'm not so sure that Texas's defense is that good. Maybe it is. Maybe we find out that it is. But what they're about to face against Ohio State is far different than anything they've faced up to this point. And my assessment of Texas is that they are clearly and undeniably a worse football team than Georgia. Georgia beat them in their building. They beat them in Austin. And they beat them in the SEC championship with a backup quarterback. I think that kind of proves that I think that proves that Georgia is a superior team. They beat them twice. And one time was in Texas's building and the other time was with a backup quarterback. Georgia's a better football team than Texas. And I didn't think that Georgia was very good this year. My power ratings have been down on them all season. I haven't been impressed with them. They got dispatched. I never was a believer in Georgia, and they were clearly a better football team than Texas. And overall, I feel like Texas plays below their talent level. I feel like the sum is less than the parts for them. They have a ton of talent. I just never really seen them go full Death Star mode. And maybe they did it against Florida, the 49-17 win over Florida. No Lagway. Actually, let me just double check here and see. I'm pretty sure Lagway didn't play in this game. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Lagway did not play in this game. That's Texas's best game. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen it with Texas. In fact, I thought Texas was better last year. This year, I don't know. There's just something about like Quinn Ewers, not super dynamic. He's talented. Just kind of always wanted more from him. Again, we've seen Ohio State go full blitzkrieg Death Star mode. They have the talent to do it and just obliterate anybody. Texas, I feel like, has the talent to do it. I just have not really ever seen them do it. I don't think we see Ohio State do what they did to Oregon. Texas is going to have a better defense than Oregon, better defense in Tennessee. Another thing about Texas, though, that's kind of concerning to me is the way that, like, almost immediately Sark was, like, essentially begging for bulletin board material to fire his team up. That was like he was basically like, hey, anybody find me any sort of quote where Ohio State's like getting a little too arrogant and disrespecting us. I just didn't like that. That felt not like didn't like it from the perspective. It did not inspire confidence in Texas. Not like I didn't like it in terms of like that's classless or anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just think it's not a good sign. And it almost feels like you're mentally beaten already if you're saying that kind of stuff. I've always liked Sark. Brilliant offensive mind, great recruiter, comeback story, and all that stuff. But I don't think he's a killer. And maybe that's why Texas just kind of feels a little underwhelming, against some is less than the parts. They don't feel scary. They don't feel scary. They just feel talented. And when your team is not playing to its potential, I point the finger at coaching there. Again, I think they had a pretty easy schedule. They did go to Michigan and get a win. Michigan's not a bad team. They looked bad during Big Ten play, but beating Alabama, beating Ohio State, pretty solid team. So that win aged pretty well for Texas. But other than that, not really impressed with what I saw from them. They don't feel like Ohio State feels like they're peaking at the peak of their powers, like they are all cylinders firing. I just have never really felt that from Texas. They don't really inspire fear. And maybe Ewers is checked out. He knows he's not going to be the quarterback there next year. Maybe he's going to transfer. Maybe he's going to go to the NFL. Feels like Texas fans want Arch Manning. That might have something to do with it. I don't know. I can't pick Texas to beat Ohio State. I think Ohio State is going to beat Texas. Again, I'll say 31-20, 27-17, something like that. Best case scenario for Ohio State's like a 34-20. It's hard for me to see Texas scoring more than 20 points against Ohio State's defense. And that might even be a tall order. Fortunately for Texas, they will have this game basically as a home game. They're playing it in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl. That could buoy them a little bit. I don't think it's enough to sway me to picking Texas, though. So give me Notre Dame to win and cover the 1.5 points. Give me Ohio State to win and cover the 5.5 points. And that will set up a national championship of Ohio State versus Notre Dame. I like Ohio State to win that game. I would have Ohio State. Let's see if our numbers are going to come back here. And they're not. I would have Notre Dame versus Ohio State as about a 10-point spread. I will take Ohio State to beat Texas, and I will take Notre Dame to beat Penn State. That's going to do it. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and subscribe if you would like to see more college football deep dives.